हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे टोनी मॉरिसन की नॉवल बिलवेड के बारे में। ऑथर के बारे में हम पहले ही एक वीडियो में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। चलिए आज नॉवल को डिस्कस करते हैं। चलिए अब नॉवल को डिस्कस करते हैं। Beloved begins in 1873 in Cincinnati, Ohio, where Sid, a former slave, has been living with her 18-year-old daughter Denver. Sid's mother-in-law, Baby Suggs, lived with them until her death 8 years earlier. Just before Baby Suggs' death, Sid's two sons, Howard and Bugler, ran away. Sid believes that he fled because of the malevolent presence of an abusive ghost that has haunted their house at 124 Bluestone Road for years. Denver, however, likes the ghost, which everyone believes to be the spirit of her dead sister. On the day the novel begins, Paul D., whom Sid has not seen since they worked together on Mr. Garner's sweet home plantation in Kentucky, approximately 20 years earlier, stops by Sid's house. His presence resurrects memories that have lain buried in Sid's mind for almost 2 decades. From this point on, the story will unfold on two temporal planes. The present and Cincinnati constitutes one plane, while a series of events that took place around 20 years earlier, mostly in Kentucky, constitutes the other. This latter plane is assessed and described through the fragmented flashbacks of the major characters. Accordingly, we frequently read these flashbacks several times, sometimes from varying perspectives, with each successive narration of an event adding a little more information to the previous ones. From these fragmented memories, the following story begins to emerge. See, the protagonist was born in the South to an African mother she never knew. When she is 13, she is sold to the Garners, who owns Sweet Home and practice a comparatively benevolent kind of slavery. There, the other slaves, who are all men, lust after her but never touch her. Their names are Sigzo, Paul D, Paul A, and Paul F. and Halle. Seed chooses to marry Halle, apparently in part because he has proven generous enough to buy his mother's freedom by hiring himself out on the weekends. Together, Seed and Halle have two sons, Howard and Bugler, as well as a baby daughter whose name we never learn. When she leaves Sweet Home, Seed is also pregnant with a fourth child. After the eventual death of the proprietor, Mr. Garner, the widowed Mrs. Garner asks her sadistic, vehemently racist brother in law to help her run the farm. He is known to the slaves as school teacher, and his oppressive presence makes life on the plantation even more unbearable than it had been before the slaves decide to run. Schoolteacher and his nephew anticipate the slaves' escape, however, and capture Paul D and Sigso. Schoolteacher kills Sigso and brings Paul D back to Sweet Home, where Paul D sees Sid for what he believes will be the last time. She is still intent on running, having already sent her children ahead to her mother-in-law, Baby Suggs' house in Cincinnati. Invigorated by the recent capture, schoolteacher's nephew sees Sid in the barn and violate her, stealing the milk her body is storing for her infant daughter. Unbeknownst to Sid, Hal is watching the event from a loft above her, where he lies frozen with horror. Afterward, Halle got mad. Uh, Paul T. sees him sitting by a churn with butter slathered all over his face. Paul T. meanwhile is forced to suffer the indignity of wearing an iron bit in his mouth. When school teacher finds out that Sid has reported his and his nephew's misdeeds to Mrs. Garner, he has her whipped severely despite the fact that she is pregnant, swollen, and scarred. Sid nevertheless ran away, but along the way she collapses from exhaustion in a forest. A white girl, Amy Denver, finds her and nurses her back to health. When Amy Tatter helps Sid deliver her baby in a boat, Sid names their second daughter Denver after the girl who helped her. Sid received further help from Stampede, who rows her across the Ohio River to Baby Suggs' house. Baby Suggs cleans Sid up before allowing her to see her three other older children. Sid spends 28 wonderful days in Cincinnati where Baby Suck serves as an unofficial preacher to the black community. On the last day, however, school teacher comes to Sid to take her and her children back to Sweet Home. Rather than surrender her children to a life of dehumanizing slavery, she flees with them to the woodshed and tries to kill them. Only the third child, her older daughter, dies, her throat having been cut with a handsaw by Sid. Sid later arranges for the baby's headstone to be carved with the word beloved. The sheriff takes Sid and Denver to jail, but a group of white abolitionists led by the Bodwins fight for her release. Sid returns to the house at 124 where baby Suggs has sunk into a deep depression. The community shuns the house and the family continues to live in isolation. Meanwhile, Paul T has endured torturous experiences in a chain gang in Georgia where he was sent after trying to kill Brandywine, a slave owner to whom he was sold by school teacher. His traumatic experiences have caused him to lock away his memories, emotions, and ability to love in the tin tobacco box of his heart. One day, a fortuitous rainstorm allows Polly and the other chain gang members to escape. He travels northward by following the blossoming spring flowers. Years later, he ends up on Seed's porch in Cincinnati. Polly's arrive. A later 124 commences the series of events taking place in the present time frame. Prior to moving in, Polly chases the house resident ghost away, which makes the already lonely Denvers resent him from the past. Seed and Polly look forward to a promising future together until one day, on their home from a carnival, they encounter a strange young woman sleeping near the steps of 124. Most of the character believes that the woman who calls herself Beloved is the embodied spirit of Seed's dead daughter, and the novel provides a wealth of evidence supporting this interpretation. Denver develops an obsessive attachment to Beloved, and Beloved's attachment to Seed is equally, if not more, intense. Paul and Beloved hate each other, and Beloved controls Baldy by moving him around the house like a rag doll and by seducing him against his will. When Baldy learns the story of Seed's rough choice, her infanticide, he leaves 124 and begins sleeping in the basement of a local church. In his absence, Seed and Beloved's relationship becomes more intense and exclusive. Beloved grows increasingly abusive, manipulative, and parasitic, and Sita is obsessed with satisfying Beloved's demands and making her understand why she murdered her. Worried by the way her mother is wasting away, Denver leaves the premises of 124 for the first time in 12 years in order to seek help from Lady Jones, her former teacher. The community provides the family with food and eventually organizes, under the leadership of Ella, a woman who had worked on the Underground Railroad and helped with Seed's escape, in order to exorcise Beloved from 124. When they arrive at Seed's house, they see Seed on the porch with Beloved, who stands smiling at them naked and pregnant. Mr. Bodwin, who has come to 124 to take Denver to her new job, arrives at the house, mistaking him for school teacher. Seed runs at Mr. Bodwin with an ice pick. She is restrained, but in the confusion, Beloved disappears, never to return. Afterward, Polly comes back to Sid, who has retreated to baby Suck's bed to die. Morning, Beloved. Sid laments, "She was my best thing," but Polly replies, "Your best thing, Sid." The novel then ends with a warning that this is not a story to pass on. The town and even the residents of 124 have forgotten Beloved, like an unpleasant dream during a troubling sleep. Characters: Polly, Polef, and Sixo. Polly and Polef are the brothers of Poldy. They were slaves at Sweet Home with him. Hale, Sid, and earlier baby Suck Sixo is another fellow slave. Sixo and Polly died during the escape from the plantation. Sid, the protagonist of the novel, is a proud and noble woman. She insists on sewing a proper wedding dress for the first night she spends with Hale, and she finds school teacher's lesson on her animal characteristics more deb- debilitating than his nephew's sexual and physical abuse. Although the community's shunning of Sid and baby Suggs for thinking too highly of themselves is unfair, the fact that Sid prefers to steal food from the restaurant when she works rather than wait online with the rest of the black community shows that she does consider herself different from the rest of the blacks in her neighborhood. Yet Sid is not too far proud to accept support from others in every instance. Despite her independence and her distrust of men, she welcomes Paul Day and the companionship he offers. Seed's most striking characteristics, however, is her devotion to her children, unwilling to relinquish her children to the physical, emotional, and spiritual trauma she has endured as a slave. She tries to murder them in an act that is in her mind one of motherly love and protection. Her memories of this cruel act and of the brutality she herself suffers as a slave infuse her everyday life and lead her to contend that past trauma can never really be eradicated. It continues somehow to exist in the present. She thus spends her life attempting to avoid encounters with her past. Perhaps Seed's fear of the past is what leads her to ignore the overwhelming evidence that Beloved is the reincarnation of her murdered daughter. Indeed, even after she acknowledges Beloved's identity, she shows herself to be still enslaved by the past because she quickly succumbs to Beloved's demands and allows herself to be consumed by Beloved. Only when she learns to confront the past head on, to assert herself in its presence, can she extricate herself from its oppressive power and begin to live freely, peacefully, and responsibly in the present. Themes: Slavery's destruction of identity. Beloved explores the physical, emotional, and spiritual devastation wrought by slavery, a devastation that continues to haunt those characters who are former slaves even in freedom. The most dangerous of slavery's effect is its negative impact on the former slaves' senses of self, and a novel contains multiple examples of self alienation. Baldy, for instance, is so alienated from himself that at one point he cannot tell whether the screaming he hears is his own or someone else. Slaves were told they were subhuman and were traded as commodities whose worth could be expressed in dollars. Consequently, Paul is very insecure about whether or not he should possibly be a real man, and he frequently wonders about his value as a person. Seed also was treated as a subhuman. She once worked in a school teacher, giving his pupils a lesson on her animal characteristics. She too seems to be alienated from herself and filled with self loathing. Thus, she sees the best part of herself as her children, yet her children also have volatile, unstable identities. Denver conflates her identity with Beloved's, and Beloved feels herself actually beginning to physically disintegrate. Slavery has also limited baby Sug's self conception by shattering her family and denying her the opportunity to be a true wife, sister, daughter, or loving mother. As a result of their inability to believe in their own existence, both baby Suggs and Baltic become depressed and tired. Baby Suggs' fatigue is spiritual, while Baldy's is emotional. While a slave, Baldy develops self-defeating coping strategies to protect him from the emotional pain he was forced to endure. Any feelings he had were locked away in the rusted tobacco tin of his heart, and he concluded that one should love nothing too intensely. Other slaves, Jackson Till and Phyllis and Halley, went insane and thus suffered a complete loss of self. Sid fears that too. She too will end her days in madness. Indeed, she does prove to be mad when she kills her own daughter. Yet Sid's act of infanticide eliminates the perverse forces of the institution of slavery. Under slavery, a mother best expresses her love for her children by murdering them and thus protecting them from the more gradual destruction wrought by slavery. Stampede muses that slavery's negative consequences are not limited to the slaves. He notes that slaves causes whites to become changed and altered, made bloody, silly, worse than they ever wanted to be. The insidious effects of the institution affect not only the identities of its black victims but those of the whites who perpetrated it and the collective identity of Americans. Where slavery exists, everyone suffers a loss of humanity and compassion. For this reason, Morrison suggests that our nation's identity, like the novel's characters, must be healed. America's future depends on its understanding of the past, just as Seed must come to terms with her past before she can secure a future with Denver and Polly. Before we can address slavery's legacy and the contemporary problems of racial discrimination and discord, we must confront the dark and hidden corners of our history. Crucially, and beloved, we learn about the history and legacy of slavery not from school teachers or even from the Baldwin's point of view, but rather from Seed's, Baldy's, Stampede's, and Baby Suggs. Morrison writes history where the voices of a people historically deny the power of language, and Beloved recuperates a history that has been lost either due to willed forgetfulness, as in Seed's repression of her memories, or to forced silence, as in the case of Baldy's Iron Bit. The importance of community solidarity. Beloved demonstrates the extent to which individuals need to support of their communities in order to survive. Seed first begins to develop her of self during her 28 days of freedom when she becomes a part of the Cincinnati community. Similarly, Denver discovers herself and grows up when she leaves by 24 and becomes a part of society. Baldy and his fellow prison inmates in Georgia prove able to escape only by working together. They are literally chained to one another, and Paul D recalls that if one is lost, all lost. Lastly, it is the community that saves Sid from mistakenly killing Mr. Bodwin and casting the shadow of another sin across her and her family's life. Cincinnati's black community plays a pivotal role in the events of 124. The community's failure to alert Seed to school teachers' approach implicates it in the death of Seed's daughter. Baby Suggs feels the slight as a grave betrayal from which she never fully recovers. At the end of the novel, the black community makes up for its past misbehavior by gathering at 124 to collectively exorcise Beloved. By driving Beloved away, the community secures Seeds and its own release from the past. The power and limits of language. When Sixo turns school teachers' reasoning around to justify having broken the rules, school teacher whips him to demonstrate that definitions belong to the definers, not to defined. The slaves eventually come to realize the illegitimacy of many of the white definitions. Mr. Garner, for example, claims to have allowed his slaves to live as real men, but Paul D questions just how many manly they actually are. So too does Paul D finally come to realize with bitter irony the fallacy of the name Sweet Home. Although Sigso eventually reacts to the hypocrisy of the rhetoric of slavery by abandoning English altogether, other characters use English to define the world on their own terms. Baby Suggs and Stampede, for example, rename themselves Beloved, may be read as Morrison's effort to transform those who have always been the defined into the definers. While slaves, the characters manipulate language and transcend its standard limits. Their command of language allows them to adjust its meaning and to make themselves indecipherable to the white slave owners who watch them. For example, Baldy and the Georgia prison inmates sing together about their dreams and memories by garbling of and tricking the words. The title of the novel alludes to what is ultimately the product of a linguistic misunderstanding. At her daughter's funeral, Seed interpreted the minister's address to the dearly beloved as referring to the dead rather than the living. All literature is indebted to this slippery, shifting quality of language, the power of metaphor, simile, metonymy, irony, and wordplay all result from the ability of words to attach and detach themselves from various possible meanings. Family. Beloved explores how the conditions of slavery at once make family more fragile, more firmly bonded. Since slaves were considered private property, slave owners could break up families by buying or selling individual family members. It was especially lucrative to sell children who were young and had many working years left. Baby Suggs directly experienced having her children sold to other slave owners. She gave birth to 9 children, all but one of whom were taken from her. Yet the experience of losing nearly all of her children did not break Baby Suggs. On the contrary, it greatly intensified her relationship with her one remaining son, Halle, who went to extraordinary lengths to buy her freedom. The familial bonds produced by slavery can also prove dangerous, as demonstrated by the intensity of Seed's maternal instincts. When school teacher arrives at 124, Seed doesn't hesitate in her attempt to protect her children from him. But others find it deeply disturbing that Seed attempted to protect her children by trying to kill them. Polly, for instance, tells Seed that her maternal love is too thick, but Seed rejects his claim and insists love is or it ain't. Then love ain't no love at all. Motifs. The supernatural. Morrison enhances the world of Beloved by investing it with a supernatural dimension. While it is possible to interpret the book's paranormal phenomenon within a realist framework, many events in the novel, most notably the presence of a ghost, push the limits of ordinary understanding. Moreover, the characters in Beloved do not hesitate to believe in the supernatural status of these events. For them, poltergeists These premonitions and hallucinations are ways of understanding the significance of the world around them. Such occurrences stand in marked contrast to school teachers' perverse, hyper scientific, and empirical studies. Allusions to Christianity. Beloved's epigraph taken from Romans 9 is to 25 bespeaks the presence that Christian ideas will have in the novel. The four horsemen who come for seed reference the description of the apocalypse found in the book of Revelation. Beloved is reborn into Seed's world, drenched in a sort of baptismal water. As an infant, Denver drinks her sister's blood along with her mother's breast milk, which can be interpreted as an act of communion that links Denver and Beloved and that highlights the sacrificial aspect of the baby's death. Seeds acts so horrified school teacher that he leaves without taking her other children, allowing them to live in freedom. The baby's sacrificial death, like that of Christ, brings salvation. The book's larger discussions of sin, sacrifice, redemption, forgiveness, love, and resurrection similarly resound with biblical reference. Milk. Associated with life and nurturing of children, milk is a substance that makes many meaningful appearances in Beloved, but often in a way that degrades and twists its wholesome maternal connotation. Most notably, after the birth of her daughter, Seed is raped by school teacher's nephew, and her breast milk meant for her newborn baby is stolen. Halep, broken by witnessing his wife's rape and the overwhelming inhumanity of slavery, smears butter across his face. The enslaved people in Beloved are deprived of every form of human care, and they yearn for the love and nurturing that they were denied. Yet, even as they attempt to restore the sanctity of motherhood and childhood in a new community, the former slaves of Cincinnati are still haunted by centuries of children being separated from their families. New mothers forced to be wet nurses for white babies, and the impregnation of black women by their white enslavers. This trauma manifests in scene when after Seed murders Beloved, she nurses her surviving daughter. Denver drinks Seed's breast milk and the blood of her sister at the same time, consuming both her mother's love and the violent consequences of slavery that still persists within their community. Symbols. The color red. Colors from the red part of the spectrum, including orange and pink, recur throughout Beloved, although the meaning of these red objects varies. Amy Denver's Red Velvet, for example, is an image of hope and a brighter future, while Paul D's Red Heart represents feeling and emotions. Overall, red seems to connote vitality and the visceral nature of human existence, yet, in Beloved, vitality often goes hand in hand with mortality, and red images simultaneously refer to life and death, to presence and absence. For example, the red roses that line the road to the carnival serve to herald the carnival's arrival in town and announce the beginning of Sid, Denver, and Baldy's new life together. Yet they also stink of death. The red rooster signifies manhood to Baldy, but it is a manhood that Baldy himself has been denied. The story of Amy's search for carmine velvet seems especially poignant because we sense the futility of her dreams. Seed's memory is awash with the red of her daughter's blood and the pink mineral of her gravestone, both of which have been bought at a dear price. Trees. In the world of Beloved, trees serve primarily as sources of healing, comfort, and life. Denver's emerald closet of boxwood bushes functions as a place of solitude and repose for her. The beautiful trees of Sweet Home mask the true horror of the plantation in Seed's memory. Walty finds his freedom by following flowering trees to the north, and Seed finds her by escaping through a forest, by imagining the scars of Seed's setback as a Choke cherry tree, Amy Denver sublimates a site of trauma and brutality into one of beauty and wrath, but as the sites of lynchings and of Sigzo's death by burning, however, trees reveal a connection with the darker side of humanity as well. The tin tobacco box. Paul D describes his heart as a tin tobacco box after his traumatizing experiences at Sweet Home and especially at a prison camp in Alfred, Georgia. He locks away his feelings and memories in this box, which has by the time Poldy arrives at 124 rusted over completely. By alienating himself from his emotions, Poldy copes to preserve himself from further psychological damage in order to secure this protection. However, Polity sacrifices much of his humanity by foregoing feeling and gives up much of his selfhood by repressing his memories. Although Polity is convinced that nothing can pry the lid of his box open, his strange dreamlike sexual encounter with Beloved, perhaps a symbol of an encounter with his past, causes the box to burst and his heart once again to glow red. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं और हमें ये भी कमेंट करके बताएं कि आप आने वाले वीडियोस किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माई चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। थैंक यू।